So that when you're at a Rule 1 workshop, the thing that's unique is that you are basically in a position where you get to apply everything that you may have learned at that point to actual examples in the class led by Phil, led by other instructors. And so you get this opportunity to practice that you can't really duplicate in any other environment. The Rule 1 Workshop's a great place to ask questions, and actually here's some examples of actual questions that we've heard in the past.
Okay, you start by looking at the world through the passions that you have, what you love to do, that kind of thing, right? Build a list of companies that come from the industries that you're really interested in. It may be where you work or the things you're spending your money on. All right, then you'll start reading the 10Ks on companies that are in those industries. So you'll read a 10K and it'll be either boring, horribly boring, or it'll be really interesting to you. If it's really interesting, it's starting to fall within your circle of competence. If it's boring you to tears, this is probably something you don't want to dive into. So for example, I might really love my iPhone here, right? I got my iPhone and I love this thing. I wouldn't be without it, that kind of thing. And yet understanding the business that makes an iPhone, understanding Apple might be harder for me to do. It might not be something, if I start reading all about it, I might just be like overloaded with technical terms and just feeling like this is just too hard. And as soon as I feel like it's too hard, then I can know, all right, that's not in my circle yet. So I'm going to stay onto the stuff. Like when I got started, I focused on stuff like guns because I was experienced with guns. And thought I understood real well why some companies produce good guns and some don't. And outdoor equipment. Remember, I was in special forces and I was now a river guide. And so I understood very, very much about tourism and touring companies. So I found like looking at cruise lines was interesting to me because it's similar to the business I was in as a guide. Outdoor companies, I would use stuff from companies like North Face or Patagonia, and some of which were public and some weren't. And you just start to dig in and see, oh, this is interesting, or oh, this isn't. And what you want to do is narrow it down as narrow as you can get it at first, because there's tons of companies, even in a narrow circle of competence, more than you'll want to research, really. And so the narrower you can get it, the better, and focus and become an expert in that area. I became an expert on Harley-Davidson motorcycles, fell in love with them, ultimately built a company that was touring Harley-Davidson motorcycles back in the day and invested in that. So you just focus on what your real interests and passions are. And as you learn more about yourself, you'll be a better and better investor. Darpan. How do you go about increasing your area of competence as you get more experience with this style of investing? There we go. Increasing, little different angle. Increasing it is automatic. You have to actually restrain yourself from increasing it too quickly, because as you dive into one company, let's say I dive into Harley-Davidson motorcycles, which is public, then I'm going to find that its competitors that make motorcycles also make other kinds of vehicles. They might make RVs. They might make ATVs. They might make a different kind of motorcycle completely, a dirt bike kind of motorcycle. And so now my circle of competence could expand there a little bit, right? If I'm looking at grocery stores, I might suddenly realize that there are suppliers of grocery stores, distributors of things. There are companies that make the food. So it's really easy to expand out beyond your circle and find you need to do a lot more research, but just do it slowly so you really are not involved with hubris, which is this terrible tendency we have to think we know more than we do, especially as a beginner. You start off in this sort of beginner's mind and it all just seems like fun and everything's wonderful, and you think you know more than you know, and you don't know more than you know. And I just want to encourage you guys to really recognize you're going to have to go deep. particularly if you want an edge on options, you're going to have to go deep on the fundamental side of things. Many of your books provide detailed explanations on options trading. Not one has talked about options trading. Haven't even talked about it in our Invested podcast much, except to say that I do it. Yeah, this is the only place where we teach it, and we teach it differently than anybody in the world, as far as I know. If the company has really good growth over a long period of time and the stock price isn't growing at all, they may be simply pouring the money back out to investors, and don't intend to have a growth strategy in the sense of growing their actual revenue. They're just a cash cow and they're just pouring money. There's a few companies out there like that. Ruger is a bit like that. They have a range of stock price maybe between 50 and 90 or something. But they pour huge dividends out to their investors. And so you kind of have to look at it and see if that fits into the portfolio. But ultimately, a company that's growing well and has got great big five numbers, stock price will keep up with it.
I would encourage you to attend a Rule 1 virtual workshop. And that's partly because of the energy, it's partly because of the structure that's brought into place, but it's also the experience that Phil has. He knows how these things how they're going to unfold and how you're going to learn. So it's really unique.